Greetings, everybody. It's Jim again, and we're going to talk about hand-to-hand right now. And I'm excited about this because, again, it's another layer of tactical combat, but also because it gives movement allowance a little bit love in combat other than just moving around. All right, so let's get right into it. We got Corvin and Quinn here. Corvin with a rapier and a backup dagger, and Quinn with a broadsword and a backup dagger, up against the likes of Tarok, which has a bastard sword only and a ton load of armor, and a Sonra who has a saber and a parrying dagger, which is called a Mongosh. Now I'm not sure if I said that correctly, but I know I could call it a parrying dagger just to make it easy, but I want to sound fancy. What can I say? All right. Anyway, what is hand-to-hand? Okay, hand-to-hand is simply when two enemies get in the same hex and they start rolling around on the ground like UFC fighters with daggers. That's pretty much it. All right. The second question is, why hand-to-hand? All these guys have perfectly good weapons. Well, what's the point? Well, let's look at Corvin again with a rapier that only does 1 damage, and look against Tarok, the guy he's up against, who has 7 points of damage that he can take every turn. He's not going to get through, right? Even if he gets around to his backside, it's going to take him forever. It's better just to try his best and get up there right up close and personal and make Tarok drop his sword. We'll get into how this happens in a little bit. But first, you just can't walk into somebody's hex and say, oh, I'm initiating hand-to-hand combat because I think it's better for me. No. Remember, you are trying to tackle somebody to the ground who has a bladed weapon on them. All right? So you got to initiate hand-to-hand. Now, first, there's 4 criteria. There's there's 1 of 4 things you have to meet. So let's go over what they are. Corvin wants to take Tarok into hand-to-hand, and the first criteria is the enemy has to have their back to the wall, or they're lying down, prone, or kneeling. Well, none of that's happening here with Tarok. He's not against the wall, and he's standing straight up. So that's a no-go. Second, the enemy has to have a lower movement allowance. Well, this is where the movement allowance gets its love, and this is where Corvin wins, because he has a movement allowance of 10, very agile, as opposed to the exact opposite of Tarok, which has so much armor, he's down to a 6. So simply enough, Corvin, on his turn, can initiate hand-to-hand combat and just walk into his hex. Okay, now, I could go over what else has to happen because they still have to resolve that, and that would happen before we go into anybody else. However, for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to go over the other 2 criteria of hand-to-hand so we can cover that so we don't lose ground. The third one, because here's the thing, Quinn wants to get a Sonra in hand-to-hand too. However, Sonra is, again, she's standing and her back's not against the wall. And unfortunately, even though Quinn's got a great 10 movement allowance, well, guess what? So does the Sonra. And on a tie, it's a no-go. So what's the third criteria? The third criteria is the attack comes from the rear. Not the front, not the side, but the rear. And it's as simple as that. Boom, he's in. And the fourth one is not as likely, but it's more along the lines, I believe, for the role-playing game, is as if the defender says, you know what, bring it. Mano a mano, I'm all about it. Okay, if they agree to it. So, now we've got both characters here initiating hand-to-hand. So what happens next? Well, now we've got to resolve it. Again, we're trying to tackle somebody with a bladed weapon, and it's not as easy as all that. So now that they're fast enough to get in there and have a way to get in there, what happens? Well, we roll a d6, and on a 1 or a 2, the defender is going to drop their ready weapon or shield, unless the weapon is a Mongosh or a dagger. If they already have that set, they're good to go. And otherwise, they fight barehanded. This is exactly the result that Corvin wants. Okay, it would be terrific for him because this way, Tarok gets to drop his bastard sword and his shield. All right, and now Asandra, if this happens to her, she would drop her saber, but would not drop her Mongosh because she's already got it's a dagger for all intents and purposes. So she's already drew it. Now. That happens on a 1 or a 2. On a 3 or a 4, it's the same thing, only if they do have a backup dagger, they get to draw it, even if they drop their regular weapons. All right? So that's what happens there. Now on a 5, this is when things work into the bad side. On a 5, the defender does not drop their weapon, and the attacker immediately backs up into the hex where they came from. They lose their turn, and the defender still gets their turn as normal. Not great. And on the 6, it's even worse. It's the same thing I just stated, only the defender gets a free hit on the attacker. Now notice, I did not say a free to hit roll. I mean they get to roll damage. Okay, so 16% of the time, this whole thing backfires. But it's better sometimes to just let it go to the wind and just see if you can get it in there, because the alternative's worse. Alright, so let's see what happens here. We'll just roll this out, see what happens to Corvin. Corvin's got a 3. That's where the defender drops his weapon and gets to still draw a dagger if they have it. Well, Turok does not, so he drops his Bastard Sword, he drops his shield, he's using his strength for punching power, and that's all he's doing. And, man, it's going to be bad news for him, and I'll get to that more in a little bit. Quinn, let's see what happens to him here. It's a 5. So even though he came in from the rear hex, a 5, she still staves him off and pushes him back. Now, if that would have been a 6, when an attacker comes in from the rear, if a 6 is rolled, you re-roll it. You just ignore it. So you re-roll it. So that's pretty interesting. So, but Quinn is not initiating hand-to-hand. Didn't happen. But Corvin did. So now what happens? Okay, well, this is where it gets a little bit more interesting also. Any prone character, you know, or when you're attacking in hand-to-hand, is a +4. Okay, a +4 dexterity, and it happens immediately, and as you know, that modifies the timing of when you attack and everything. So Corvin here would be a whopping 18 at this point, and Turok, however, would hit a little bit more often with now an 8. But the thing is, with the law of averages being out here, I actually think that's going to be more of an even fight, or at least he's got more of a chance. And then, or at the very, very least, they can, you know, let them go in the fisticuffs, and then find out what happens with Quinn and Cassandra, and maybe Corvin can get some help, because he was not going to last against a Bastard Sword and all that armor. All right. Now, you can disengage from hand to hand just by simply rolling 4 dice against your adjusted IQ. So if Turok did not like this on his turn, or his next turn, whatever the case may be, and he wants to initiate disengaging from HTH, he'd have to roll an 8 or less. It's not an attack. So it's so he's not attacking Corvin, so he's not getting that +4. He's got to roll 4. He's got to roll pretty much an escape Yahtzee. Okay, that's not likely to happen. So as you can see, there's some really great tactical things that can happen, even at the smallest of fights. And then that's great for role playing, because you're meeting somebody in the shady corner or something like that. It's a 2-on-2 fight. Things can still get interesting. Battles don't have to be huge in the fantasy trip, and that's one of the things I like. And I will see you guys next video. That's all we got for today. Have a good one.